Farmer, Councilmember Cuddeback. All right. Good evening and welcome to tonight's Monroe City Council meeting. This is the regular business meeting for February 22nd, 2022. The time right now is 7 p.m. Ms. Wyckoff, will you please call the roll? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Council members present and establishing a quorum are council members Fulcher, Kinney, Fisher, and Scarborough.
Thank you. We received word earlier today that Councilmember Davis would not be here this evening. I also received word from Councilmember Gamble that he might be a little bit late in joining us and maybe on audio initially. So unless there's objection, we'll consider Councilmember Davis's absence as excused. And we will note for the record when Councilmember Hanford and Councilmember Gamble join us. Also for this evening, please note that Councilmember Fisher is on call this evening. If he gets called out during the meeting, he will notify me and Ms. Wyckoff that he got called out. He will then be out of the meeting and will notify us when he returns. When we see that happen, we will note for the record his absence. Does anybody have any questions? All right. And as Councilmember Gamble is not available right at this moment, I'm going to ask that Councilmember Fulcher please lead us in the pledge. Thank you, Councilmember Fulcher.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilmember Fulcher. All right, the first item that we have on the meeting this evening is under announcements and presentations. And this is a proclamation from Women's History Month and International Women's Day. Whereas in 1987, Congress designated the month of March as Women's History Month to honor women's contributions throughout history. Whereas March 8th is International Women's Day, a day dedicated to the global celebration of women's achievements, the recognition of biases against women, and a call for action for equality, equity, inclusion, and justice for women everywhere. And whereas women serve in our community in many places, including businesses, nonprofits, and government, and I am thankful for the contributions of each of the women working for the city of Monroe, including the women in leadership roles, Councilmember Fulcher, Councilmember Tammy Kinney, Judge Jessica Ness, City Administrator Deborah Knight, Finance Director Becky Hassert, Court Administrator Pam Haley, and City Clerk Jody Wyckoff. And whereas women have historically and still today perform a significant amount of uncompensated and undercompensated work, including at home, and we recognize and honor their substantial contributions that support families and our community. And whereas we are a better people and a better local, national, and global community as a result of the strength, compassion, leadership, ingenuity, advocacy, and contributions of women from every background and lived experience. And whereas despite the value that women bring to our society and inherently have as people, there remain biases in culture and institutional systems across the globe, including in the United States, that restrict women's opportunities to be equals to men in important segments of life and society, thereby marginalizing and at times silencing women's voices while limiting their liberty to participate fully in government, our economy, and their own families, or even to exercise their natural freedom of personal choice in their own lives and their futures. And whereas while there have been advances in ensuring equal rights, we as a people need to do better to effectuate reforms across all segments of our society, economy, and government to ensure that women genuinely can realize the blessings of liberty in all of its forms as men can. Now, therefore, I, Jeffrey Thomas, do hereby recognize March 2022 as Women's History Month and March 8th, 2022 as International Women's Day. And further, I call upon everyone to listen to women's voices, to genuinely honor the inherent value of every woman, and to take actions to remove inequities, unjust rules, and cultural norms that limit women from realizing the blessings of liberty in all its forms as men can. Thank you. Great, we're gonna move to a public hearing this evening. So we have a public hearing for wireless code amendments accompanying amendments to Title V to establish new franchising requirements. And this will be presented by Amy Bright, Ms. Bright, and also Emily Miner.
Mayor, we had some technical difficulties with one of the presentations, so I'm going to actually stop sharing and Ms. Minor will start sharing.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Wyckoff. Go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight we're here to hold a public hearing on wireless code amendments and associated amendments to Title V franchise agreements. I would like to introduce Emily Minor with Ogden Murphy Wallace. She has helped the city create these amendments, and she's worked with industries affected by these amendments, and she'll be presenting on behalf of the city tonight.
All right, thank you. And Ms. Minor, one moment, please. Please let the record show that Councilmember Hanford joined us at some point in the last couple minutes. Good evening, Councilmember Hanford. All right, Ms. Minor, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council. Thank you so much for having me back in front of you again this evening. I'm here tonight, as Ms. Bright mentioned, to discuss the wireless code amendments that we have been working on for several years now. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll get rolling. So I hope you can all see that okay. Good. Okay, great. So again, my name is Emily Minor. I've been before you a couple times to talk about some franchises, and tonight we're talking about the wireless code update. I've been working with Ms. Bright and the Planning Commission to bring these forward to you, and we're really excited to get to present them tonight. So I think it's helpful to have a little bit of background. I know, again, the Planning Commission has worked on this extensively, but I'm not sure everyone's familiarity with why we're here and what we're doing. So I just wanted to give a real brief background. In 2016, the wireless industry had made a request to install the deployment of small wireless facilities. And so these are, I'll get into exactly what they are, but they were a change in technology and how signals were being transmitted. And so the technology is a little bit smaller, and cities just didn't have the regulations in place in order to help the deployment of these types of facilities. So in 2016 and through about 2018, cities are preparing for the deployment of this type of facility. And then in 2018, the FCC issued a declaratory rule and third report in order. So this is a fancy way of saying the FCC has established some new rules and regulations about how cities can regulate the deployment of this new technology. And the reason that this came forward was because industry said that cities were sort of holding up the deployment process and really wanted to sort of smooth the way for this new technology. And so in response to that, cities needed to then go back to the drawing board and update their codes to reflect these changes that the FCC had handed down to us. So that's sort of how we are here today in front of you, and gives a little bit of the background as to why these changes are needed. So again, small cells are different. Small wireless facilities are different than what you think of typically when you think of the wireless tower. When you think of a typical wireless tower, there are these big, tall towers, usually standalone, usually on private property outside the right of way. And the purpose of those towers was to transmit the signals long distances, so across valleys, over mountains, et cetera. So they were going long distances because that's what was needed originally. Now, though, everyone is using their smartphone and the internet to talk to your fridge and to your children and to your computer. And so there needs to be a densification of the network in order to accommodate the demand on the network. And so the purpose of these small wireless facilities or small cells is to, again, densify that network. So instead of having big towers, a smaller number of big towers, we have smaller equipment, but more of it on poles. So you can kind of see the little graphic there that the macro tower would go this longer distance. And then we've got all these little circles that are illustrating the small cells or the small wireless facilities. So this is just, I think, a helpful representation. I'm kind of a visual learner. I like to see the scale of things. You have the macro tower there on the far right at about 80 feet. And then we're looking at those small cells on light poles, for example, or just things on the street at about 30 feet. Sometimes they're placed on buildings, but typically are going to be deployed in the right of way on the existing infrastructure that's there. So at about 30 feet, and then you can see a person there is at about 6 feet. So just kind of a helpful visualization of what we're looking to deploy here in terms of how it compares to the older facilities, the older macro towers. So again, a few more visuals that I think are helpful. You can see here, these are some wooden pole installations. You've got the antenna up there and then the equipment box. These are actual installations in Seattle, same thing here. The antennas are up there. And so, you're not looking at a lot of equipment on the poles, but there is more. And so our goal here with our design standards and our regulations that we're putting forth in front of you this evening is to ensure that the facilities that are getting deployed are consistent across the city, that they're established in a uniform manner and are designed as much as possible to blend into the background with the existing streetscape. So again, these were the wooden pole installations, and then we also have samples of the non-wooden pole installations. So these would be on your light poles, your metal light poles. So there's some examples here. I was just up in Alaska this weekend and I caught sight of this one on the far right here. So I wanted to flag that for you. They're getting deployed all over. This is not something that's just happening in Monroe, but it's happening all over. So I always think it's helpful to show some examples of other ones that have actually been deployed in other jurisdictions. This one in the middle here is from Seattle, excuse me. And then the one on the left, I think is an example that hasn't actually been deployed yet, but was a sample that I got from another PowerPoint. So just some variations there. And then a few more, these are renderings of other types of non-wooden pole installations. So our standards have to meet the requirements that are established by the FCC. And in order to make sure that our standards are compliant with the FCC, they need to be published in advance and they need to be reasonable. And so the goal of our aesthetic standards is to fit those two requirements, but then also make sure that we're trying to achieve a uniform, consistent look across the city. So we're trying to achieve something more like this on the left versus all this kind of clutter that's there on the right. And that's what our standards are trying to do. We are limited in what our standards can do by this FCC case that was then also established in the law that says that our standards cannot materially limit the ability of any competitor to deploy their facilities in the city of Monroe. So for example, we can't have a blanket undergrounding requirement because that would inhibit the ability of the small wireless facilities to operate in the city because the antennas need to be above ground. So we can't just have these blanket standards such as an undergrounding requirement because that would materially inhibit somebody's ability to deploy within the city. So that's what our standards are tested against and what the carriers are looking at when they review our standards. So getting into the nitty gritty details here, we have the key updates. There's a lot of information here. So if you have questions, I don't blame you. Feel free to jump in and I can stop as we go. But this is going to be a little dense, so I apologize in advance. The first thing that we did was the updates to the macro tower. It's the existing kind of big facilities. These are the tall towers. We've updated the application requirements, the permit review process, and the design standards. Then we also created new regulations for the small wireless facilities. That includes the application requirements, permit review, and design standards. And then we also adopted a clearer process to review eligible facilities requests. So in a nutshell, that's what the updates to 2262 have done. Now we're going to get into the details of exactly what all that means. So the key elements of the macro tower section is that we've established macro facilities as a permitted use in all zones within the city, subject to a prioritized hierarchy. We've stated that macro facilities are approved administratively, so that means a limited opportunity for public comment. And the reason that we have done that is because the FCC has mandated that these permit applications be reviewed within what are called safe harbor shot clocks. And so we have a limited amount of time in order to review these applications. And if they meet the code, then they're basically permitted. And so the opportunity for public comment is just inherently limited by that FCC regulation. So we've suggested that they be approved administratively by the director, assuming that all the code requirements have been met. We've clarified the application and permitting process. We've also created a location hierarchy so that these facilities need to be co-located first on an existing wireless facility structure. And then there's kind of a tiered approach down from there. And then we've updated the design and concealment standards for macro facilities. So that's all located in 2262-050 through 090. And then similarly, we've done kind of a parallel application and design standard process for the small wireless facilities. Again, small wireless facilities are an established use in all zones within the city. They're also administratively approved, meaning the public comment period is limited. We are limiting them to essentially trying to limit them to the right of way in residential zones. So if there's a residential use in a residential zone, they're not allowed on that private property. They are allowed in the right of way. So you may have one in front of your house, but they won't be located on private property. And then we've also provided for a permitting process and then specific design and concealment standards, which I'm going to get into next about how these facilities will actually look. Here's the detailed information about the application process and the review process. I think what's important to note here is that we do require a sworn affidavit from an RF, a radio frequency engineer, confirming that the facilities will be compliant with the FCC. We can't prohibit somebody from coming into our city and placing one of these facilities on a light pole due to health concerns. The FCC has preempted the city's ability to regulate in that capacity. So the best that we can do is require that sworn affidavit that says that their facility meets the FCC RF emission standards, but we can't regulate based on those emission standards ourselves. So we've just required that affidavit. They also need to require proof of all other necessary approvals from the FAA and other approvals from the FCC. And then we also have a professional engineer certificate of construction plans and structural foundation to make sure that the structural integrity of the pole remains valid. Getting a little bit into the design and concealment standards for these small wireless facilities, we're prohibiting ground mounted equipment. Any new poles or replacement poles must be constructed with the ADA in mind, must be compliant with that. We're not allowing signs to be located on these facilities. The preferred location is the location with the least visible impact. Antennas and equipment are not supposed to dominate the structure. Again, we're prohibiting them to be located, these facilities to be located on property containing a residential use in a residential zone. So these are just kind of some of the general standards that we'll be looking at when an application for a small wireless facility comes in. And then we have additional design criteria for each type of structure that these facilities could go on. We have, again, the non-wooden poles, the wooden poles, existing buildings, and wireless facilities located on strands. So we have different design standards based on each of those types of structures. And so I'll run through those in a little bit more detail next. We also have even more standards if the smaller facility is being proposed to be located on a new pole. So they're proposing to locate on a new pole versus an existing structure, or on decorative poles or poles in the park. So this is a heightened standard. The intent there is to make sure that we're being very intentional about locating new poles in the city, because we're trying to minimize the amount of clutter and stuff that's in the right of way. And then we are also trying to be very thoughtful about the existing design decorative poles that you have and protecting those as much as possible, as well as the park spaces. So we have a heightened standard of review for that. Again, we can't out and out prohibit these types of facilities from locating in the right of way and locating in the city. So we can't say, no new poles, no going on decorative poles, but we can create that heightened standard, which we've done here. So again, trying to walk a fine line between protecting the city's aesthetic while also staying compliant with the FCC regulations. Here's a few more details about the design standards and stealth techniques for facilities located on new poles, decorative poles, or in parks. Again, we're looking to seek to minimize the visual obtrusiveness of the facility. If there's an existing design on a neighboring pole, they're supposed to follow that existing design. Again, trying to create consistency across different types of carriers. And similarly, if a stealth design has already been approved, then the applicant must utilize a substantially similar design. So again, just trying to create some consistency in what we're putting in the right of way. Lastly, we've got eligible facilities requests. This is was already in the code, but needed some updating. This is a very technical component of the code that simply creates standards for requests to modify an existing structure. So if somebody comes in and says they want to, change an antenna or, add some extra cabling or something like that, they would typically submit an eligible facilities request. And that is a very, very streamlined review process. Again, this is taken almost exactly word for word out of federal law. And it's just good to have in our code so we don't have to cross-reference what federal law says. We can just rely on what our code says, and it will help staff and applicants when these types of requests come in. So I think it's important to note that we did send this code out for review by the industry. That was AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, Crown Castle, et cetera, everybody who is a player in this part of our state. We also talked with Snohomish County PUD, and we also received a comment from Washtenaw Aviation. We incorporated the comments that we thought were appropriate. Some of those included changes because there has even been a more recent FCC order. So we needed to do some updates for that. We also accepted some suggestions that removed redundancies and agreed to some clarifications regarding the permitting and construction requirements. Comments that we received but excluded were suggestions to add additional flexibility to the aesthetic standards. We didn't think that was needed because there is a release valve if for whatever reason the carriers can't comply with the design standard. Again, they've had an opportunity to review the code in advance, so presumably they have, they've been given an opportunity to say this will or won't work. So we don't think that additional flexibility needs to be built directly into the code. And there were some minor revisions related to permitting requirements for the macro facilities that we didn't accept either. But for the most part, we were able to get to a common ground with everybody who did provide comments. So that was great. So just a quick background on the process here. Between 2019 and 2021, we've worked together to develop these new regulations. Again, we send it out for industry review, which we then got back comments and incorporated those. The Planning Commission has reviewed the draft regulations and has discussed those at 9 meetings. So you guys have definitely really dived into this topic, which has been great. And then in January of this year, the Planning Commission did vote to recommend these amendments be approved by council. And then tonight we have them in front of you to answer any questions and discuss further. We have discussed internally with staff that we wanted to move this forward in 1 reading because of how extensive of a process that Planning Commission has gone through. But we understand that council may need time to review, in more detail. So we're happy to take this to a 2nd reading if that's your preference. And with that, I will stop with my questions, and I will stop sharing my screen so that Ms. Wyckoff can take over again.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Minor. Ms. Bright, do you have anything further to add before I turn to council or hearing?
I do not.
Okay, council members, before I open it up to hearing, do you have any questions for clarification of staff? All right, seeing none, we're going to go ahead and open this for public testimony portion of our public hearing. If you'd like to speak this evening regarding this proposed ordinance, please go ahead and put up your hand. You can do that by hitting the little raise hand icon in Zoom or hitting *9 on your phone. And I do have a hand up with Councilmember Hanford, so I'll go ahead and acknowledge him first. Go ahead, Councilmember Hanford.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I just wanted to ask for clarification, Ms. Minor. I can't remember where it's at, but it's somewhere in this Puget Sound area. I've seen towers, cell towers with fake tree limbs on them as if to partially disguise it. I think it's Linwood maybe. But I was wondering, would that be part of this? We could legislate that, or how does that come about?
Yeah, there's a very clever term for those that I can't think of off the top of my head. Because what they're being, someone has requested the deployment of one of those in one of my other jurisdictions. I'm sorry, I can't think of what it is off the top of my head. But that said, the way that our code is drafted does allow for the design and concealment element to reflect the existing surroundings. So for example, you wouldn't want to mandate that all of those facilities have tree limbs on them, because what if they're going to be deployed inside, on top of a building, then it may look silly. So we have the flexibility to add those concealment elements if it's appropriate, pending the potential location that they're requesting to be located in. So great question. Yep.
All right, thank you, Ms. Minor.
Thank you.
Councilmember Hanford, did you have anything further?
No, sorry.
No, thank you. You moved on the screen, so you may have been going like this, but I didn't see it. Sorry. Councilmember Kinney, you have your hand up. Go ahead. Councilmember Kinney? Okay, everybody else is moving. Councilmember Kinney is not. So we'll go ahead and see if Councilmember Kinney is able to join us again. We can always catch her comments following the public hearing as well. I'll try one more time since you just turned her video off. Councilmember Kinney, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
We can now. Go ahead.
All right. I just wanted to concur with Councilmember Hanford about the disguising of the poles. I think that's a wonderful thing to do if we can do it. I have also seen those disguised as trees. And if that's possible, I just wanted to weigh in and say that I think that's a great idea, if possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for clarification before we move to public hearing? All right, saying none, we'll go ahead and again, if you are in the Zoom app, go ahead and hit your little hand up icon, which I think is in the bottom middle of your screen. If you're on the phone, hit *9. We do have two people who have their hands up right now to speak. The first one is Kim Allen. We will bring Kim Allen forward. Kim Allen, you are now in the panel. Please go ahead and take yourself off mute and also turn on your video if you're able to. Good evening. And
Good evening.
Before you speak, let me go ahead and state for the record that comments are limited to 3 minutes per speaker. We do ask you identify generally where you live. We don't need to have your address per se, but just generally where you live, and state your name for the record. After you've done those two things, we'll start the 3-minute timer. So Kim Allen, please go ahead and state your name for the record and area of residence, and then we'll start the timer. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mayor. My name is Kim Allen. I'm with the Wireless Policy Group. My home is in Olalla, Washington, over in Kitsap County, and my office is in Issaquah.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm here tonight on behalf of Verizon Wireless, and we wanted to give our thanks to the City of Monroe and the staff for what was actually a Herculean effort to try to bring the code up to the current standards. Federal law is changing constantly and serially, and so it has been a challenge for everybody to create codes that are compliant with federal law and are also workable. So we appreciate the outreach to the industry. Being end users of the code, it's important that the code be workable. And so we appreciate our feedback being discussed and considered. And with the demand for service that we're experiencing, which is dramatically increasing, certainly with the pandemic, we need to deploy new facilities, both small wireless facilities and new macro towers throughout the country to meet the need for additional network demand. The macro tower network will remain the backbone of our network because it provides voice and text and also generator or battery backup, which the small cells typically don't. The small cells infill capacity to add space for additional users in the network and also to increase data speeds. So now we certainly do have an enormous demand from our customers, and we will be looking forward to deploying in Monroe with the code that is very workable going forward. Just to answer Councilmember Hanford's question and address that, the term that we use is monopine or monofir to refer to the tree-like concealment that we can put on the large macro facilities, and certainly that is incorporated in this code. It is a fairly common practice in the Pacific Northwest, given the types of trees that we have. And so certainly that's an option under the code, and we commonly create those types of concealment for our facilities. So thank you very much for the opportunity to contribute and to speak. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer any.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next person who is signed up to speak. That would be Greg Bush. So we'll go ahead and move Ms. Allen to the attendees and Greg Bush forward. Greg Bush, you are now in the panel. You can go ahead and take yourself off of mute and turn on your video if you like. Please state your name and area of residence or employment for the record, and then we'll start the timer. Go ahead.
Excellent. This is Greg Bush here on behalf of AT&T. Does my microphone work?
Can hear you. Yes, go ahead.
Excellent, perfect. So I'm also with Wireless Policy Group, and I'm here on behalf of AT&T. My home is in Kirkland, and Wireless Policy Group's offices are in Issaquah. So I'd like to thank the council for the opportunity to speak tonight. And on behalf of AT&T, I'd like to thank the city for updating its code to keep pace with the change in technology. As my colleague said, it's a difficult task to keep abreast of the latest advances in technology and all of the regulations passed by the federal government, and making sure that that aligns with the city's goals while also remaining workable for all the wireless providers. It's an incredible task, and we're thankful for the city that it's been so involved and up to speed on all of this. It's important for AT&T to keep providing coverage and use the latest technology to serve Monroe residents, businesses, and first responders. So we appreciate the high level of professionalism shown by the Planning Commission and staff. The code tonight, as discussed, has been through several rounds of detailed review, and I have no comments tonight beyond what AT&T has already submitted in the record. And ultimately, right now, we appreciate the effort put in by the city, and I'd like to thank you again for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bush. We'll go ahead and move you to the attendees list. If there's anybody else that would like to speak on this matter this evening, please go ahead and raise your hand. Again, that's *9 if you're on the phone, or raise your virtual hand in Zoom. Okay, is there anybody interested in speaking? Last call. All right, seeing none, I'll turn to council, and we'll move the timer, of course. Thank you, Ms. Wyckoff. Go ahead, Councilmember Scarborough.
I'll move to close the public testimony portion of the public hearing.
Hanford seconds.
I have a motion from Councilmember Scarborough, a second from Councilmember Hanford to close the public testimony portion of the public hearing. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll move to vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes 5-0. Okay, I turn to council again. Councilmember Scarborough, you had your hand up. Did you mean to make a motion?
Yes, I move to close the public hearing.
Kinney, second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Scarborough, a second from Councilmember Kinney to close the public hearing. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll move to vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? Councilmember Hanford, you have your hand up. Was that for deliberation or for the next motion?
For the next thing.
Thank you. Okay, we'll finish the vote. All in favor, say aye. It was 5, opposed 0, abstentions 0. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Councilmember Hanford, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, just based on history, like was said earlier, we normally don't like waiving the rules to pass first and second readings the same night. So I was wondering if the mayor or staff could give us, if there's a timeliness reason why we should move this forward sooner. Would love to hear from staff as to the urgency.
Thank you, Councilmember Hanford. Ms. Minor, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. That's a great question, Councilmember Hanford. I think the reasoning that staff had on this when we were discussing internally was that it has gone through extensive review and consideration by the Planning Commission with several opportunities for public comment. At this point, if council was considering any revisions, we would certainly take those back to the drawing board and review them. but because of the technical nature of this code amendment and because of the limitations that we have in terms of actually making substantive changes due to the FCC regulations, it didn't make sense from our perspective to do a second reading and take up council's precious time on the agenda. So that said, though, if you have direction or want to see changes or just want to sit with it a little longer, that is absolutely reasonable and totally within the council's discretion, and we will do whatever the council directs.
Councilmember Hanford, you still have the floor. I'm going to just ask the question of Ms. Wyckoff. When would this come back to council if the council chose to not waive first reading this evening?
The next business meeting is March 8th, I believe.
Okay, and I'm going to turn to Ms. Minor. Ms. Minor, is there any issue if the council elects to wait until March 8th? As Councilmember Hanford has indicated, usually there's an external driver that causes the council to waive first reading. Is there any sort of external driver or issue that I'm not aware of that would cause the council to want to waive first reading this evening versus bringing it back on March 8th?
There is no pending applications or anything like that that would encourage us to get this done sooner rather than later. That said, if an application did come in, we would be reviewing it under the existing regulations, which are not directly applicable and could be problematic. So I think from that perspective, it would be great to get it done. But I don't think that to my knowledge, we don't have an application in the queue lined up to be submitted. So I don't think that's a true concern. I would just note I'm not available on the 8th. So it would be up to Ms. Bright and the planning staff to bring this forward if you wanted to bring it back in March 8th. Otherwise, we'd look to later in March if you'd like me to be here for that.
Okay, so not that it's a per se legal risk, but you would be, the issue would be that if an application came in between today and the 8th, that application would be reviewed under current code as opposed to the code that the Planning Commission has recommended this evening. And so that would be the difference, is something vesting in a different regulation than what this would purport to be.
Exactly.
Okay,
Yep.
Councilmember Hanford, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. While I really appreciate all the work that Planning Commission has done on all this, we have a council member absent tonight, and I don't feel comfortable, especially since there's not any deadline that we're trying to meet. I don't feel comfortable waiving the first reading. So I'm going to move to accept as first reading ordinance number 008-2022, repealing MMC 22.62, large wireless communication facilities, and replacing with MMC 22.62, wireless communication facilities, amending MMC 21.12 definitions, and forward to the March 8th, 2022 business meeting for a second reading.
Councilmember Kinney, go ahead.
Point of order, I believe Councilmember Hanford said 21.12 definitions rather than 22.12 definitions.
Councilmember Hanford, was your intent to read option 2, item 1 verbatim?
Option 2, number 3 is on my list verbatim, yes.
Ms. Wyckoff, can you please put that up on the screen since I'm looking at option 2, 1 and 2, but not 3?
Yes, he's reading it off of the agenda bill, which is what I copied it from, but yes, I will bring that up.
Oh, no. Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, 22.12, sorry.
Okay, Ms. Wyckoff, is that on the slide right now?
Yes,
Okay, which
the
sorry,
first one.
The first one, okay.
Yes.
So Councilmember Hanford, was it your intent to read number 1 on this screen?
Correct, sorry.
Okay. Ms. Wyckoff, will that suffice to understand that his intent was to read what as a motion number 1 there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Mr. Well, do you have any issue with that? Does he need to read that in?
No issue. The intent of the council member is clear.
Thank you. I have a motion from Councilmember Hanford for option 2, item 1 that is currently on the screen. I do not have a second at this point. Is there a second?
Can you second?
I have a second from Councilmember Kenny. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll move to vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much, everybody. All
Thank
right,
you, Ms. Minor.
you go ahead and move on to the next item on the agenda.
Mayor, we have
Yes.
one other motion that goes with this.
Oh, my bad. Thank you. Go ahead,
Sure.
Councilmember Hanford.
Yeah, thank you. I move to accept as first reading ordinance number 009-2022, adopting MMC 5.54 utilities and telecommunication franchises, and forward to the March 8th, 2022 business meeting for a second reading.
Scarborough, second.
You have a motion from Councilmember Hanford, a second from Councilmember Scarborough for option 2, bullet number 2, listed on the screen. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll move to vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. All right, we are now ready to move on to item 5.2, correct? All right, sounds good. All right, we're going to move on to item 5.2 under public hearings. This is ordinance number 001-2022, adopting pre-annexation zoning for second reading and final for second hearing and final reading with Ms. Bright. Ms. Bright, go ahead.
Good evening again. This is, as you've mentioned, this is the second of 2 public hearings for the Connor pre-annexation zoning. Ms. Wyckoff, can you start my slides, please? Thank you. Can you go back to the introduction? Sorry. All right, before we get started tonight, because this proposal focuses on seems to focus on one property, out of abundance of caution, we're treating this as a quasi-judicial matter. And at this time, our attorney, Zach Well, will go over the appearance of fairness doctrine.
Thank you, Ms. Bright. As the council is aware from previous actions involving quasi-judicial decision-making, the council in this context is essentially characterized as acting as a judge and jury. You're not acting in a policy-making capacity. This particular proposal, this pre-annexation ordinance that's before you tonight, is really within the gray area as far as that quasi-judicial versus legislative divide exists under state law. And as Ms. Bright indicated, it is staff's recommendation to treat the matter as quasi-judicial, just out of an abundance of caution, because it does involve a single piece of property owned by a single entity or individual. For that reason, I will be asking the council a series of questions under the appearance of fairness doctrine regarding any disclosures that you would make concerning your impartiality and or prejudgment of any of the issues implicated here. The appearance of fairness doctrine requires that proceedings of this type be fair not only in fact, but in appearance. And the legal standard that Washington courts have developed for this purpose is whether a disinterested person, being appraised of all relevant facts, would be reasonably justified in thinking that a particular decision maker's interest or involvement in the matter may affect his or her judgment. I will now ask the City Council as a whole a series of questions, and a lack of response will be considered as a negative response. The first series of questions will address the issue of interest of council members as it relates to the underlying proposal. Does any council member have a financial interest in the underlying property or the proposal before you? Does any council member have a family member who is a party of record in this proceeding? Does any council member have a personal, familial, employment, or other business relationship with the applicant or any other implicated party? Does any council member own property within 500 feet of the site in question? Is any council member aware of any other personal interest or involvement with the proposal, the parties of record, or the property that should fairly be disclosed? For the record, no council member provided any responses to those questions, which again will be considered a negative response for the entire council. The second series of questions deal with the issue of impartiality. Is any council member aware of any personal bias for or against any aspect of the proposal? Has any council member prejudged any of the issues before you this evening? Has any council member not reviewed the materials that were provided in the council packet for this proposal? Is any council member aware of any reason why he or she would not be able to perform his or her duties in an objective, impartial, and fair manner? Again, please let the record show that there were no affirmative responses by any council member to those questions. The final question this evening involves ex parte communications. And the question is, has any council member had any outside communications or ex parte communications regarding this matter while the proposal has been pending before the council? Again, please let the record show that there were no affirmative responses. Mr. Mayor, that concludes my appearance of fairness disclosure inquiries, and I will turn the microphone back to Ms. Bright.
Thank you, Mr. Lell. Ms. Bright, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Lell. Next slide, please. Thank you. As you're probably aware, because this is the second public hearing, we're here to discuss the property that's in the triangle shape in the middle of the screen. It is located off of Tester Road, just south of the Monroe High School entrance. It's located within the city's southwest urban growth area, and it is a vacant lot owned by the Connor family. Next slide. Pursuant to the Monroe Municipal Code, the City Council shall establish zoning designations for territory subject to annexation. So that's what we are doing here tonight. Next slide. Here is our future land use map. So the zoning designation needs to be consistent with the future land use map in the comprehensive plan. Next slide. Zooming in on this area, you can see that this little triangle doesn't have a zoning designation. It is white. Next slide. And going down to B on this slide, we're back to that code section again. It says when a territory to be annexed doesn't have a specified comp plan designation, pre-annexation zoning of the territory shall have a default designation of low density single family residential, which for us is R4. This is our zoning map. And next slide. So zooming in on that, it's really hard to see because our color that we've chose for R4 is a light yellow. So this light yellow does apply now to this triangle piece of property. And that is what we are proposing, R4. And so this is a type 4 permit, which requires planning commission recommendation to city council and for city council to hold 2 public hearings at least 30 days apart. City council held their first public hearing on December 14th. Things were a little bit backwards. We actually held the planning commission public hearing on February 14th, 2022. And planning commission did make a recommendation to city council that the city council approves the zoning of R4 for this property when it does get annexed. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Bright. Any questions before we move to public hearing? All right, no questions. We'll go ahead and open up the public hearing. If you'd like to speak on this matter, please raise your hand. You can do so by hitting your virtual raise hand button in Zoom or by hitting *9 if you're on the phone. At this time, please raise your hand if you'd like to speak on this item for public hearing. I'll make the request one more time. If you're on the phone, please hit *9. If, however, you are in Zoom, please select your virtual hand. Okay, I see that there's nobody interested in speaking on this matter this evening. Is there a motion from council? Councilmember Scarborough.
Yeah, I'll move to close the public testimony portion of the public hearing.
Can you second?
Fisher.
I have a motion from Councilmember Scarborough, a second from Councilmember Fisher to close the public testimony portion of the public hearing. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll move to vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes 5-0. I turn to council. Councilmember Scarborough.
Yes, I'll move to close the public hearing.
Kenny second?
I have a motion from Councilmember Scarborough, a second from Councilmember Kinney to close the public hearing. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll move to vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. And I turn to council one more time. Councilmember Kinney, thank you. Go ahead.
I move to adopt ordinance number 001/2022, adopting pre-annexation zoning for 0.85 acre parcel, Snohomish County Tax Assessor number 2706-1000-102-600, located in the vicinity of the Monroe High School, also known as the Connor property, pursuant to RCW 35A 14.330, adopting supportive findings, providing for severability, and establishing an effective date.
Scarborough second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Kinney, a second from Councilmember Scarborough for recommended action number 3 for Agenda Bill 5.2 as shown on the slide. Any discussion on the motion?
Baker.
Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll move to vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions?
Meeting tonight.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. All right, we're gonna go ahead and move on to the next item on the agenda. Thank you. And that item will be public comments. There's a time for there's a time set aside for members of the public to speak to the city council on any issue related to the city of Monroe, except any quasi judicial decision that is matter that is subject to the public hearing. 3 minutes are afforded to each speaker. Is there anybody that would like to speak to the council this evening? All right, I've got 2 hands up. So we'll go ahead and bring in Mr. Harrigan first. So we'll bring in James Harrigan. Good evening, Mr. Harrigan. You can take yourself off mute and turn on your video if you'd like. For you and the other party who has raised their hand as well, just a reminder, as stated with the public hearing, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. I ask that you state your name and area of residence for the record, or area of employment if you're here in your employment role. And then we will start the timer for 3 minutes. So go ahead, Mr. Harrigan.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. I just, well, my name is James Harrigan, and I live in Monroe here in downtown Monroe. And I just wanted to give a little shout out for a community meeting that we're going to be having tomorrow, February 23rd at 5:15. It's going to be focused on the role of community land trusts and community land trust housing. And just as a reminder, I spoke to the council toward the end of last year. I think a few of the council members were not there. So I just wanted to make sure I got on and put that out there for people who are interested to come and learn more about what CLTs are. As I think everyone here is aware, affordable housing and the housing crisis is something that's on top of mind for many people. And so I think I look forward to continuing to bring information to the council about what CLTs are and how they can be a great asset to our community. So thank you for the time. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Harrigan. So we'll go ahead, Councilmember Scarborough.
Yeah, you said tomorrow. I didn't catch the time nor the location.
So it is tomorrow at 5:15, February 23rd, 5:15, and it is Zoom. It's on, it's virtual. So I will, right after I get off, I'll send an email with the link to all the council members. And then also, I think anybody who's not a council member who's interested and is listening, if you reach out to maybe Deborah Knight or someone with the city, or the other option would be if you just go on Facebook and search for Sky Valley Community Forum. There's a public event that should be visible to everybody, and you should be able to find the link there as well.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you. Any, okay, thank you very much, Mr. Harrigan. And I understand that you'll send the link to our council when you're done. And I appreciate that. Thank you. And members of the public should check Facebook as you mentioned. So thank you. Please let the record show that Councilmember Gamble entered the room at 7:53. Good evening, Councilmember Gamble. Yeah, Gamble. All right, thank you, Mr. Harrigan. We'll move you to the attendees list and we'll bring forward Danielle Campbell. Danielle Campbell, you are now in the panel. You can take yourself off mute if you like and turn on your video. Please state your name for the record and area of residence or area of employment if you're here in your employment capacity, and then we'll start the timer.
Hi, my name is Danielle Campbell. I'm with Campbell Homes, and I live in Snohomish. My husband and I just recently finished a mixed-use building in there in the town of Monroe at 209 North Blakely Street. It consists of 2 residential units and 2 commercial units. I'm having a tough time getting the commercial units leased out due to parking. So for the city of Monroe, there was no parking requirement for the commercial units for that building. And currently there's 2 to 4 hour parking, max parking on, I believe it's North Blakely, but it only runs to Hill Street. And our building is north of Hill Street. So I'm here to see if the city would consider extending that 2 to 4 hour parking, at least a portion down our block of North Blakely Street. And that would help me out in leasing out my commercial units.
Okay, thank you very much. And Ms. Campbell, have you sent an email to our staff as of yet?
I met with Scott Peterson on site, and
Okay.
he recommended I join one of these meetings to start off the dialogue, I guess, and see what you guys try to say.
Okay, thank you very much. So what we'll do is Mr. Peterson or Mr. Roberts will go ahead and pull together some information and bring it back to our council for discussion. So that's what we'll do. And like that, council can consider if they want to make adjustments to those rules.
Okay.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Scarborough, go ahead.
Can we have the address again, please?
209 North Blakely Street.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Campbell.
Thank you.
Okay, if anybody else would like to speak to the council this evening, please go ahead and raise your hand. Again, that's *9 if you're on the phone. It's doing a little virtual hand raise if you are in Zoom. Please put your hand up at this time for public comment. All right, seeing nobody else that would like to speak this evening, we're going to go ahead and move on to final action item number 1. So this is 7.1, move to adopt ordinance number 005, 2022, adopting 2022 PROS plan and amendments to chapter 7 of the 2015-2035 comprehensive plan with Mr. Ben Swanson. Good evening, Mr. Swanson, go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor, Council. So tonight's staff is presenting the final reading for the 2022 Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan and associated amendments to Chapter 7 of the comprehensive plan. And so the Park, Recreation, and Open Space Plan, I know prior to the 2 meetings prior to this, Cindy Mendoza with MIG, our consulting group, gave a pretty lengthy presentation on the PROS plan, and I summarized essentially the ascendant amendments to Chapter 7. So I'll just briefly go over the PROS plan in this presentation. And what the PROS plan is it's ultimately a appendix to the city's comprehensive plan. And what it does is it, just like the comprehensive plan that has a 20-year vision, the PROS plan is the 20-year visions for the city's parks, recreation, and open space system. And with the PROS plan, it just takes the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan and refines them down more and really focuses just on parks. And with that plan, it focuses on, or it looks at the inventory of existing conditions, future needs assessments, funding priorities, and from those funding priorities develops the funding plan, which essentially the next agenda bill we'll discuss develops the methodology and recommendations for the maximum allowable impact fees. And so it's all tied together. And then the amendments to Chapter 7 of the comprehensive plan, that's our park recreation open space element of our comprehensive plan. And so within that chapter, many of the figures that are linked to that chapter were adopted out of our 2015 PROS plan. And so those amendments were necessary to essentially bring those facts and figures up to speed with the 2022 plan. It does not change any of the goals and policies that currently exist in the comprehensive plan. And so the amendments there, again, just deal with maps and population and growth and those kind of things that are associated with it. And so with that, I will answer any questions if council has it.
All right, council members, do you have any questions or a motion? All right, I don't see if there are any questions. Is there a motion? Councilmember Kinney, thank you. Go ahead.
I move to adopt ordinance number 005/2022, repealing the 2015 Parks, Recreation, and Open Space PROS plan in its entirety, and replacing it with the 2022 PROS plan adopted herein, amending Chapter 7, Parks, Recreation, and Open Space element of the 2015-2035 City of Monroe Comprehensive Plan to reflect the 2022 PROS plan, and adopting the PROS plan by reference as Appendix F, affirming the city's compliance with RCW 36.770A 130, authorizing the mayor to make non-substantive edits following adoption, adopting supportive findings, providing for severability, and fixing a time when the same shall become effective.
Hanford, second.
Okay, I have a motion from Councilmember Kinney, a second from Councilmember Fulcher for the requested action as shown on the slide in front of us. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll move to vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes 6-0. Thank you very much, everybody. All right, next item on the agenda would be final action number 2. So this would be 7.2. Final action amendments to Chapter 3.52 MMC Park Impact Fees with Mr. Swanson again. Go ahead, Mr. Swanson.
Great, thank you. So as I stated on the previous agenda bill, the PROS plan develops the methodology and overall funding that we need to accomplish our goal. And with that, it develops the impact fees associated with it and essentially establishes a ceiling for those impact fees that a local jurisdiction can charge. In Monroe's case, we went through and looked at the max ceiling of what we could charge for impact fees, and then also compared those with our existing policies, specifically around the housing action plan, and acknowledged that need to promote for that missing middle housing. And so the recommendation that we were looking at coming out of the public hearing that we had last time was essentially keeping the impact fees the same for duplex and 3 to 4 units, which essentially is that missing middle housing. However, raising the other impact fees for the single family, the greater than 5 units and mobile homes to the amount allowed to be charged under the methodology that the city established. And it should be noted off the top of this, based off the methodology, we're not allowed to charge 100% of those impacts, 100% of those charges to impact fees. And so it's approximately 30% that's taken off the top of any of those fees. So none of this truly represents 100% of the impact fees. There's an automatic reducer that's applied to all those numbers across the board. One of the reasons why, or there's 2 reasons actually why we're asking for first and final reading tonight on this ordinance is, number one, staff did, or council did hold a public hearing to take public testimony on the impact fees. Wasn't a requirement by code, but we wanted to hear from any residents or any developers, any public testimony on the proposed fees. During that public hearing, staff had the code in a draft form. We just did not have it in ordinance format. And so essentially that same material was presented at the public hearing. Second reason is with the adoption of the PROS plan, and the PROS plan it had to be adopted by March 1st in order to be eligible for RCO grant allowances. With the adoption of the PROS plan, the methodology that supports these impact fees is tied into that PROS plan. And so with the adoption of that plan and and taking away the 2015, we essentially lose our methodology that's associated with it. If council did choose to push it out 2 weeks into the next regular business meeting, kind of having that gap in logic between the methodology, I don't think there's a great deal of challenge that's going to occur with that. Additionally, we're pushing out the actual implementation of these fees to out 90 days. And that's essentially to allow developers time to, or for the city to notify developers that we have on file that, hey, these new fees are coming in. If you have permits that you're ready to submit, please submit them now, because there's obviously some increases to the single family, the greater than five and mobile home units. So with this, with the first and final reading, we're really not speeding up any timeline. We have a built-in clock there to delay it by 90 days anyway. And so it should give developers plenty of time. And so with that, I'll take any questions that council has.
All right, thank you. Council members, any questions or a motion? Councilmember Hanford, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Swanson, for explaining why you're requesting the actions tonight. And I do remember discussing this. So I'll move to waive council rules of procedure requiring 2 readings for an ordinance.
Scarborough, second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Hanford, a second from Councilmember Scarborough to waive council rules of procedure for requiring 2 readings for an ordinance. Discussion on the motion. Councilmember Gamble, go ahead.
So it's just, when I was looking through the packet, I know, Ben, we talked, but did I miss it? Because I know we had, was it in the pros plan or where was it where we had the comparators for surrounding?
I did not include that in this packet. I had it in the previous packet, but I didn't include it.
Okay, so because did we find an answer on, you know, the all, because I know the last time we talked and then when we spoke, as far as the all-in fees, where did we fall with the kind of immediate area around us? All the comparisons we did was like size and city, and you know, but because I guess the only thing I think it's great because we called it out last time in discussion. Hey, we probably shouldn't move this to missing middle, but if we're trying to attract, do we want to just be at the middle or should we be lower, trying to draw builders to build that? So that's really my question.
And so, Councilmember Gamble, I can answer your question on the rate comparison. So for duplexes with the fee as proposed right now, we're in the middle on that. And then with the 3 to 4 units, we're also in the middle on the 3 to 4 units compared with the surrounding jurisdictions. Maybe actually we're one up from the middle, I should say.
One up from the middle, and when we say surrounding, we're talking Lake Stevens, Snohomish, Sultan.
Correct. Yeah. So we're talking. Let's see. We're Mukilteo, Bothell, Mill Creek, Arlington, Woodinville, and Snohomish. We're higher than that. And so if you on the cumulative impact fees, looking at Snohomish cumulative impact fee, they're at a total, and they're at the very bottom. They're at a total of $4,758. And that, as we had discussed before, actually their park impact fees are more than what we charge. However, their school impact fees are much, much lower than what we have here.
Okay.
And then I would say, kind of in between that, the Bothell, Mill Creek, Arlington, they're around a cumulative of $8,000. Mukilteo that we're right next to, we're about a $200 difference from them.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Gamble. Thank you, Mr. Swanson. Any other deliberation or questions before we move to vote? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and move to vote. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes 6-0. Thank you. Councilmember Hanford, go ahead.
I move to adopt ordinance number 006, 2022, amending chapter 3.52 MMC Park Impact Fees, updating the city's schedule of park impact fees and the calculation methodology therefore, providing for severability and establishing an effective date.
Scarborough, second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Hanford, a second from Councilmember Scarborough for requested action number 2 for Agenda Bill 7.2 as shown on the screen. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll move to vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes 6-0. Thank you, everybody. All right, we're going to go ahead and move on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion for the consent agenda? Go ahead, Councilmember Scarborough.
I move to accept the consent agenda.
Hanford second.
I understand that you're moving to approve the consent agenda, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. And the second from Councilmember Hanford. Any discussion on the motion to approve the consent agenda? Seeing none, we'll move to vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is item number 9, new business 9.1, first reading, proposed amendments to Chapter 4.50 MMC Park Board with Mr. Swanson. It is the Mr. Swanson council meeting. Good evening again, Mr. Swanson. Go ahead.
Good evening. Last time, I promise. What we're presenting tonight is proposed amendments to Chapter 4.5 of the Monroe Municipal Code. It's the code that governs the park board. And the big purpose behind this amendment is the way the code's currently written is you have 5 at-large members, 1 member that's appointed from the Planning Commission, and 1 member that's appointed from the school district, meaning a school district employee that is on the park board. And so in order to allow a greater range of opportunities for residents to participate on these boards, what we're proposing is to change that to a full 7-member at-large board. And this has become more and more apparent as every year we get more and more applicants for the Parks Board. More people want to join and be part of it. And so with the planning commissioner serving, they already have an opportunity to serve the public on the planning commission. And so it essentially is taking up 2 spots for the public to serve, and then the other member, an employee of the school district, who, from what I understand, has been absolutely outstanding on the board. However, it's not necessarily a requirement for them to be a resident on the board. And so that's the main purpose of this amendment. You'll see as you go down in the proposed code, the other amendments are largely cleanup and other things too, or other amendments to make it more synchronized more with the Planning Commission code that's also in Chapter 4. And you'll see things in there where we remove the responsibility of the park board to essentially approve the removal of trees. That one we took out just because it places a regulatory authority on a board, which brings can bring a lot of legal liability on a city. And also it's never been, or it hasn't, at least in recent history, been a practice. Another item that we are proposing to delete is essentially a planning commission representative on the Parks Board. Again, haven't had that for 20 years, and it just hasn't been utilized. And so we decided to remove that. And then there's some definitions that aren't applicable to the Park Board chapter that are located in Title 22 in the Development Code, or just don't apply to that chapter, and is just words that aren't needed. And so with that, I'll take any questions that the council has.
All right, thank you, Mr. Swanson. And just sharing with council, in the last go around to make appointments to the different boards and commissions, I had to turn away, I think, 2 people that would have been really good Parks Board members because of because we had 2 seats that were identified for specific people. And for me, it's really important to hear from our residents. So this is something that I requested that staff bring forward for council's consideration. Mr. Swanson, this went to committee as well, correct?
Correct. It did go to the legislative committee for a review, and we also presented the proposed amendments to the park board.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Swanson. So thank you, staff, for putting this together and for council's consideration of this proposal. Councilmember Kinney, go ahead.
Just wanted to weigh in on this as someone who served on the park board for the last 8 years. I think this is a very, very wise decision, although we really appreciate the long-term commitment of both the planning commissioners who have served over the years, as well as the school district representative. There are other ways to obtain that information. And I think taking those physical presences off the board and allowing citizens of Monroe, residents of Monroe who are really interested in serving their community, the opportunity to do so is a real win-win. And I just support this wholeheartedly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Kenny. Councilmember Gamble, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I like this. I guess I just had one question, and maybe Member Kenny, you might have was there any discussion on maybe having 2 advisory board members that would still potentially serve or have the option if we did get a representative? Because I could see the logic originally of why you would want to, especially from a park board perspective, have somebody from the school district with, you know, all of the, I mean, we've invested in them and some of their parks, right? City dollars towards their vision, and then also from the planning commission with the plans that they have. So I could see, you know, the reason why potentially maybe in the past they had that requirement. But I know in other boards I've served on, we have utilized in those circumstances advisory board positions in title, you know, where you at least keep that in title, or the initial intended you know, reason for having them, but maybe not taking an actual voting seat up on the board.
Thank you, Councilmember Gamble. We had talked a little bit about that with me and staff, and one of the things that we had concluded, and again, it's a policy choice of the council. I do see that Councilmember Kenny has her hand up as well to share. But one of the things that we had concluded is that members of any board or commission can certainly attend. We also have joint meetings from time to time, for example, Parks and Planning Commission. So there are those opportunities where planning commissioners or Parks Board members or whomever can attend meetings and you know, and participate in them if they'd like to do that. So I think that's one of the reasons why we did that. Plus, yeah, so I think that's one of the reasons why this was brought forward like this. But Councilmember Kenny, go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify for Councilmember Gamble, and maybe Mike and Ben, you can weigh in as well. I believe that the intent of this change is not to do away with the sharing of information from the school district and the planning commission. It's simply to gather that information and share it at each monthly park board meeting without a physical representative needing to take a spot on that board. And I think, Councilmember Gamble, your point is well taken, that those 2 entities really need to share information with the park board, and they need to know what we're doing as well. And so that sort of cross-pollination, if you will, is very, very important. And was that partly what you were getting at?
Yeah, that's where I was going. And I guess my only concern is that, I mean, I understand the original intent was to operationalize that relationship, because while I agree with you, Mr. Mayor, that we can, you know, hey, anybody can attend and we can have those, but when you don't have it operationalized into the plan, it doesn't have a tendency to happen as often. So I'm just, maybe we could talk about, because I think this is great and we want people plugged in, but you know, some way of operationalizing into the plan that, hey, we're going to have, like you talked about the meetings, we have them from time to time, putting them in some sort of cadence, something that's in the law, you know, the park board governance or whatever, that they meet quarterly or whatever, joint meeting biannually, whatever it is that's in there, so that we don't lose that connection. I see the Director Farrell has his hand up. He's going to tell me they already have that. So
thank you, Councilmember Gamble. Mr. Farrell, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, on Councilmember Gamble's points, yes, regarding the school district, we do have agreements between the city and the school district, and one of the underlying agreements is where we coordinate staff, myself and the facilities director regularly on parks school related issues. So we will continue that, and I think it was mentioned earlier that communication to the board is really important as far as what's going on, what's been going on with Planning Commission. So sharing of minutes, and also scheduling a joint meeting to that extent, and also extending an invitation to the school district representative to come and make a presentation. So we certainly can address that and get that as a regular part of the work plan. And speaking of work plans, the park board's work plan is presented annually to council, and it's something that can be amended through the course of the year. Items added onto their work plan. So that's one thing that I certainly can do as staff, is to ensure that there's a some sort of an opportunity at a scheduled park board meeting for update presentation from school district and planning commission as well.
Yeah, I guess that's really where I'm going, is that, and I get that, but obviously we know leadership changes, people within the city change, people within the school district. All I'm trying to get at is that people, when we founded this, they felt it was so important, they put it into the Monroe Municipal Code. It's some sort of to keep that intent. Just something in the operating structure of the park board, that's more of a thou shall than just, hey, yeah, it's open, and we do that, checking, because then that puts it more incumbent upon who's ever leading at the time, as opposed to a part of the discipline, or and even though you may, it's written in the code in this instant that we shut, we'll have one of the board members, or the two of those seats will be, because they felt it was so important. So that's all I'm trying to get at. I know you guys do a great job of sharing, but as we've all learned with Brad retiring, I know you guys, you're not always going to be here, Director Farrell, and so I want to make sure that, and I know everybody on this call here is going to serve their terms or go on. I want to make sure that it's operationalized into the park board plan, so that we don't lose that.
Yes. Yeah, we can institutionalize that in that work plan, and that annual work plan, again, is something that we present to council. And as you know, the park board is an advisory board to the city council.
The other thing that was discussed is when we discussed this with the Parks Board, was that we would get them copies of the monthly reports, and staff can go over that with them as well, from Planning Commission and Parks Board to the other boards and commissions. So the staff and department reports that are on here was a subject of conversation when I spoke with the Parks Board with it about that, and the Parks Board seemed to think that that would be another good way to get information. Councilmember Kenny, I'm sorry, Councilmember Gamble, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I'm annoying. I'm still got more. I guess just on this one in particular, I don't think I heard it. When did has this been since inception that we've had this on the books?
Mike?
Park board?
The park board, having the school district representative on there,
and the planning commission.
And the planning commission. I tried to track that down, and it's kind of buried in several different ordinances, and so it may have been I want to say somewhere maybe between 2002 and the late 90s is a possibility, but that ordinance, it could have been way before that, and it just was overwritten by another ordinance. But those were the older ordinance numbers I could find associated with that subsection.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to get to it, because I always want to understand what was the intent of why they would put it in the Monroe Municipal Code, to make sure that we're not losing the intent while still granting the flexibility for those that want to serve. That's all I'm trying to get at. So,
all right, anything further, Councilmember Gamble? Okay, thank you. Councilmember Kenny, go ahead.
I just wanted to address Councilmember Gamble's concerns, which I think are valid. And I appreciate that he cares so much about this, because this is a group, obviously, that I care about very much as well, having served for so long on it. I'm wondering if any discussion was given to enlarging the Parks Board by 2 members and allowing Planning Commission and school district representatives to remain.
Not
just want to go ahead.
Yeah, not at a staff level. It was just that, and that's just goes with kind of the traditional boards of consisting of 7 members.
Okay.
And
Okay.
Councilmember Kenny, perhaps I'm wrong in this approach, but what I see is I've got two voting members. One is an employee of the school district, and one of them is a planning commissioner. The planning commissioner has an opportunity to vote as part of serving as a planning commissioner. And one of the things that I'd like to see is more people involved rather than, a smaller group of people involved in multiple boards and commissions when I can. So when I was looking at having 3 or 4 people applying for the seat or seats that became available in the fall and not being able to seat all of those people, it just struck me that this was an opportunity that they can still maintain connections as liaisons with the Parks Board and the Planning Commission and the school district. So I felt that those systems were in place to maintain those connections, and felt that this was an opportunity where I wanted to hear from residents and wanted to have them have a voice on the board. So those are the reasons. My intent here is to have members of the public serve on our boards and commissions rather than people who are already voting in other planning, like the Planning Commission saw the Parks comp plan, and then they see it again at the Planning Commission. So you've got somebody voting potentially twice on something, and it's just, I'd like to have more people involved in the process. So that's where my heart's coming from on this. It is intended to be more inclusive with getting more people to the table, rather than me saying, I'm sorry, I can't have you here because I've only got so many positions, and these 2 positions are reserved for a Parks employee who we really value, and we value the input. But I'm sorry, I can't have you in that position. I can't have you in this position because I have a planning commissioner in this position. So that's where that's coming from. Right or wrong, that's where I'm coming from. Councilmember Kenny, did you have anything further? You still have the floor.
Oh, thank you. No, I totally understand and support you 100% in that. I'm wondering if for Councilmember Gamble, and maybe again, Ben and Mike weigh in on this. I'm just wondering if we have something written into the code or somewhere that the monthly meetings will include an update from Planning Commission and the school district, that is written into the code, that we will always include an update at every meeting. Maybe that would help Councilmember Gamble feel a little better that information collection must happen so that the park board is kept in the loop, even though those 2 people will no longer be part of the board.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Kenny. Councilmember Fisher, go ahead.
So being one of the planning commissioners, it was a planning commissioner representative for the Parks Board. Great experience. They're extremely professional, and it was great to be a part of it. I feel that we had enough joint meetings with the Park Board where if I wasn't a planning commission representative on that Park Board, that I would have been able to get all the information. I agree with Mayor Thomas. Me voting as a planning commissioner and then voting also as a Park Board member is almost a double vote. And I also think that the monthly update or every 2-month update from Parks Board to Planning Commission and to Council would be appropriate.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Fisher. We still don't have a motion on the floor, just as an FYI. Did you have anything further, Councilmember Fisher? Nope. Councilmember Gamble, go ahead.
There, the mute button figured out. No, I appreciate the input on both. And yeah, no, I totally get what you're trying to accomplish, and I don't disagree with you at all, Mr. Mayor. My concern is just more along the lines of making sure that voice is still in the room. Because sometimes what can happen is you can have a board go down a path where something's already being cared for in the community by one of these particular entities. And so that's why my, from the onset was, well, hey, should we do advisory board members or something? Or even, I sit on the Public School Foundation. We always have a representative from the school, they're a non-voting member, that they, attend, and they'll review our applications that we get for funds or whatever to make sure it's not already being covered. So that's why, yeah, my intent really is to what Councilmember Fisher was just talking about, some way of just making sure that's operationalized, memorialized going forward, I'm fine. But you'll miss the day-to-day interaction. And I'm sure if you went back in time, there are probably topics on the park board where his knowledge of what was going on in the planning commission was extremely valuable during that discussion.
Yeah.
So that's the other component.
Yeah, I suspect that that was a component. I suspect that also we were a smaller community at one point in time, and it probably was a way to basically take a Parks Board of 5 and add 2 more people to the Parks Board that brought different talents to the board. So I could imagine that there are a number of reasons why those might have existed. If the council decides to vote in favor of the proposal that's before them, we will continue to have those, we will continue to make certain that the Parks Board is aware of what's going on in Planning Commission and vice versa. We will continue to share or start sharing, if we haven't been doing it, the staff and department reports from the different committees so that each board and commission has more awareness as to what the other boards and commissions are doing.
Yeah, the only, and to your point, Mr. Mayor, that may have been it. That's why I'm so interested on the history of what were the reasons why, so that we make sure that we just guard against any unintended consequences. That's really my only concern, because I think what you're trying to accomplish is spot on.
Yeah, and thank you. And Councilmember Gamble, I'd asked the same questions of staff as well. And had the same responses as Mr. Swanson provided. Mr. Swanson, go ahead.
We talked about sharing the information, especially with the planning commissioner not being at those meetings anymore. And so at the last meeting, we did share the community development monthly staff report that's presented to council, and it seemed to work well with the planning commission, and went over the individual projects and explained to them what a plat is and what all these different things mean. So that portion of it worked well. I know I'm not answering the school district side of it, but for that portion, it seemed to work well.
All right. Thank you. Are there any other questions of council or a motion or direction?
What's the time? Do I still?
Councilmember Kinney, go ahead.
I was going to move, but it sounds like someone has a comment. Sorry, maybe I jumped the gun.
Well, no, I recognized you, but if Councilmember, if you put your hand down, that's up to you. Thank you. Councilmember Gamble, go ahead.
So what's the time on this? I mean, we have positions we need to, is there time sensitive on this?
Councilmember Gamble, this is not time sensitive. It's just a matter of me holding 2 positions open until this matter is resolved. That's all. Yeah, we have a quorum on the Parks Board at this time.
It's the only reason why I guess for me personally, I know this is just first reading, so I'm comfortable voting on a first reading, but there are some open-ended questions, and we've talked about, hey, we could put this in, making sure it's operation, that sort of thing, a little bit of the historical context. Those are the only things that I'm a little apprehensive about as far as voting for a second reading and making it final. So that's it for me. I would like, when it comes back for a second reading, to make sure that we have taken care of those couple items. That's all.
Thank you, Councilmember Gamble. Mr. Swanson, go ahead.
Yeah, just for I don't know that we'll be able to give the historic context to it, but if there is some additional policy direction from a staff level, if we could summarize that up, so I can make edits. It's not a lot of work on my end to the proposed code. That would be really helpful for us as far as providing direction.
Thank you. All right, Councilmember Kenny, go ahead.
I move to accept the first reading of ordinance number 007/2022, amending chapter 4.50 MMC Park Board, updating and clarifying the composition, membership criteria, terms of office, and powers and duties of the city's park board, providing for severability and establishing an effective date.
Fulcher, second.
Okay, I have a motion from Councilmember, I was going to say Councilmember Wyckoff because I moved from Councilmember Kenny, a second from Councilmember Fulcher for the motion that is shown. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, council members, I would like clarification. I've heard from 2 council members that have expressed an interest in maybe codifying something that has staff share information from Planning Commission to the Parks Board. I think it's important for me to hear if that's something the council wants codified, or if you'd like us to just do it operationally the way that we're doing it today, or enhance what we're doing. And then if there's an interest in doing it with this board, are we going to do the same thing with all of our other boards and commissions, or should we have some sort of code or some sort of practice that addresses that more globally? So go ahead, Councilmember Hanford.
Just to say, I concur with having it codified.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Fulcher.
Having experienced a few planning commission meetings in my day, I know that it happens, that staff members are very good at sharing information, but I don't think it would hurt to have a number/letter in there that says, this is our policy.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Gamble.
I appreciate that. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm looking for. And specifically, Mr. Mayor, you made the comment about we're going to review all of the other proposals, and I basically all I'm trying to take care of, with that or in that recommendation is the fact that somewhere along the lines and without the historical context, they deemed it so important. There obviously was an issue in the past, or potentially was an issue, and I want to make sure that we're not going to create a potential issue down the road. Everything's working great now, but like I said, rotates through, and by codifying it, at least we have that there for this particular, for the park board, as was originally intended however long ago it was put in there.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Wyckoff or Mr. Farrell or Mr. Swanson, is 4.50 very specific to the Parks Board, or would there be a way to have a broader amendment within the scope of what's been brought forward to you that applies to all boards and commissions? My concern here is treating one board differently than other boards and commissions, when I think the intent here is that we share information across the boards and commissions so that they understand what's going on. I'm just looking for fairness in how things are being applied. Mr. Swanson, go ahead.
We would have to go through their separate sections, and so we would have to go into the Planning Commission chapter to amend that one, and have some similarities if council chooses.
Okay.
So it's not a catch-all.
Okay. I was just checking to see if there's an opportunity to make the change all at once. It sounds like that would not be the case. I don't have any objection to it. Just looking for opportunity if we could fold it into this. Thank you, Mr. Swanson. Councilmember Gamble, go ahead.
No, I can put my hand. I think there's a purpose on the school district side because it's parks related, because it's fields, and there's that crossover there. So I wouldn't imagine it would be across. We want a school board representative for sharing for every single committee that we have. So I think you are going to have some differences depending upon the board or committee on representation based on the audience that you're trying to serve for the community. That's would be my 2 cents.
Okay. I was thinking about Planning Commission in my comments, not school district. Thank you. All right. Any other discussion on the motion? All right. So I'm understanding this, that there's a motion on the table for accepting as first reading. Staff will do their best to drill down a little bit more on the why, as to why those 2 positions were on the Parks Board, and also bring back an amendment that will reflect the sharing of information with the Planning Commission and vice versa, and sharing information with the school district. Any objection to what I've said there? All right, we're going to move to vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes 6-0. Thank you very much, everybody. I really appreciate the work on this and the deliberation. All right, we're going to go ahead and move on to new business item number 9.2, confirm appointment, Community Human Services Advisory Board, position 3, and ad hoc position. And I show that Ms. Wyckoff has got this one. Ms. Wyckoff, go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Jody Wyckoff, City Clerk for the record. Tonight before you, you have one appointment for a vacant seat that is a voting member of CHSAB, and the other is an ad hoc non-voting position that we're asking for confirmation of the mayor's appointment. I don't really have much more to say, so I'm here for answering questions if you have any.
Thank you, Ms. Wyckoff. I interviewed both of these applicants last week. Councilmember, I was going to say Councilmember Cutterback. Sorry, Patsy. Former Councilmember Cutterback, Ms. Cutterback, brings a lot to this board. I mean, she works in this field. She's got experience working as a council member recently. She understands sort of the continuum and of connecting things. And I think that having her serve in this position will be really, really valuable, both for the Community Human Services Advisory Board, for the service delivery that they are charged with, and also for just helping people out broadly in this particular field. So I respectfully request that you confirm Patsy Cutterback's confirmation to this board. Councilmember Hanford.
Thank you. Yes, I was so excited to see when I read the packet to see her name in there. And I think she'll do a great job with that. So I move to confirm Mayor's appointment of Patsy Cutterback to Community Human Services Advisory Board, position 3, a vacant seat with the term ending 12/31/2025.
Second, Cardinal.
Thank you. We have a motion from Councilmember Hanford, a second from Councilmember Scarborough for the first requested action on the screen. Any discussion on the motion? I do see that Patsy Cutterback is in the audience, so if you've got any questions for her, I'm sure she could be brought forward to answer questions. Go ahead, Councilmember Gamble.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say that similar to Councilmember Hanford, that I am extremely excited that Patsy is on here. I just think she brings a ton to the table. And, we missed each other on her going out, ceremony or, retirement, or however we want to talk about it. So she didn't get to hear all the nice things I had to say about her. But for those that you gotta bear with me for 2 seconds, that Patsy's one of the reasons why I'm involved in city government, and have just always been extremely impressed with how she deliberates and to your point, Mr. Mayor, how you put it, ties stuff together and all the different capacities she fills. I can't think of a better person to serve on this particular board. And I've always kind of looked up to her as a mentor. So I'm just excited that she's back. And I'm excited that she had to sit through all of the discussion on the previous items in the audience. That was just for you, Patsy.
Thank you. And we do have Ms. Cutterback in the panel. Ms. Cutterback, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm honored that I'm able to serve in this capacity. I hope that I'm voted on with the appointment. And it was interesting to sit on this side, and you guys are doing a great job. It was really interesting to hear the discussion and be away from it. So thank you for your service, and I look forward to serving the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cutterback. All right, we have a motion on the floor, a second. Any other deliberation? Seeing none, we'll move to vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes 6-0. Congratulations, Board Member Cutterback. All right, we'll go ahead and move Ms. Cutterback back to the attendees list. The second requested action is the appointment of one of 2 ad hoc positions. So this board is, as you're aware, a relatively new board. We have people with technical backgrounds in this field, in addition to residents. So this kind of reflects some of the conversation we had previously, but this being a new board, that's why we have a couple of ad hoc members. This ad hoc member that I've requested appointment of, Paul Stayback, I had a nice conversation with him. He has former lived experience of living in a state of homelessness. He currently works with people who are homeless, residents who are homeless, to help them in times of crisis. And I feel that that he would be a nice addition to the board as a non-voting member, and would be able to provide some much needed support and perspective to help us with service delivery. So I'm respectfully requesting your consideration to confirm Paul Stebeck to the CHSAB as an ad hoc member. Go ahead, Councilmember Gamble.
Yeah, I was excited to see and read the application in here for Mr. Stayback. I'm going to move to confirm the mayor's appointment of Paul Stayback to a Community Human Resource or Services Advisory Board ad hoc position, non-voting position with no term date. I think it's just a great perspective to have, and thank you for the willingness to step forward and serve the city of Monroe. Truly appreciate it.
Second, Scarborough.
Yeah, I have a motion from Councilmember Gamble, a second from Councilmember Scarborough. Any discussion on the motion? Saying none, we'll move to vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes 6-0. Thank you very much, Council. I appreciate your consideration and your confirmation of those appointments. All right, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next item on the agenda, which would be consent. I know you've got it up on the screen. Council member reports. Oh, nope, I'm sorry. 9.3, comprehensive plan update consultant agreement with Lance Bailey. Mr. Bailey, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Thomas and members of the council. I thought you were going to skip out on me there, but so
no, I wasn't looking at the slide. I've become used to the PDF that I work with. My fault. Go ahead, Mr. Bailey.
no problem. So what we have before the council this evening is a request to authorize the mayor to sign a consultant contract with MIG Consulting. The contract would authorize MIG to provide project management services to work on and complete the 2024 comprehensive plan update. The contract is being written in not to exceed 1.8 million. By city policy and procedure, any professional services contract that's more than $100,000 needs approval from city council. So that's why we're here this evening. And just a little bit of background: by state law, the city is required to do regular updates to our comprehensive plan, and our next state mandated update is scheduled and required to be completed by June 30th of 2024. So we're getting ready to start into that 2-year process. And in addition to the update of all of the elements of the comprehensive plan, the city is also going to be doing updates to each of our system plans, which would be water, sewer, stormwater, and transportation. So this project will be a coordinated effort between Public Works and Community Development. As far as the selection process for the consultants, the city had initially selected 3 consultants that we had had requested that they submit proposals. In the end, we had a combined proposal from two of the 3 selected consultants. It was MIG, MEG, and BHC. So they teamed up and submitted one combined proposal, which really provides a wealth of background and experience between the 2 consultants. Both have worked with the city in the past. MIG most recently did the pros plan, which you considered this evening. So both of the consultants have experience working with the city and have done successful work in the past. For the 2022 budget, council did include $975,000 for the initial phase of this project. The additional funds will be included in the upcoming budget for 2023, and the overall projected cost is just under 1.8 million for the contract. And as I mentioned before, the city is scheduled to have this completed by June 30th of next year. So with that completes my presentation. I will take any questions from council.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Bailey. Are there any questions or a motion from council members. Councilmember Scarborough, go ahead. Councilmember Scarborough, we'd love to hear you. Please go ahead and take yourself off mute.
I owe you a buck.
No, you don't.
Do I understand that we're paying 1.8 million for the services of somebody to put together our comp plan? And is that what we've done in the past? Probably not having been involved in that. Maybe Becky can answer that for me.
Mr. Bailey, go ahead, and Ms. Hassard, you can add in as needed.
Yeah, so Councilmember Scarborough, so this would be an update of the city's existing comprehensive plan. So we would be looking at all of the existing chapters and elements, in addition to the updates for all of the system plans with the city. So it's a little bit broader than just the comprehensive plan.
Becky?
So Councilmember Scarborough, I wasn't here for the last major update that we've done to the comprehensive plan. So I really couldn't answer as to how the costs compare. I can tell you that as we have been looking at other services, this didn't seem surprising for this cost. And this also includes, updating our transportation as well as all of our utility elements as well. So these costs are being spread out among the utilities as well as in the general fund. So.
Okay, then the next question is probably Jason Gamble. You've been here the longest. Have you seen this before? And the other question to Becky is, do we have the money to pay for it?
Councilmember Scarborough, just a second. You've got the floor right now, so I'll turn to Councilmember Gamble. He's got his hand up when it's time to do that. I'd like to see if Ben Swanson is in the attendees list, and like to bring him forward because I know that he's been around as well. So we'll go ahead and Ben, are you there?
I am. Thank you.
Yeah, do you have any experience on this that you can inform the amount?
I do. I wasn't here for the 2015 update, but came shortly after, and so have some understanding of the 2015 comp plan. And yeah, it was I don't think it was quite up to the 1.8, but I think it was around a 1.4 I think cost. And what's really, especially if we were just doing the comp plan itself, just the various elements by themselves, you'd probably be looking around I don't know, I think the cost was right around $300,000-$400,000. But we just have all of these elements associated with it all happening at one time. In other jurisdictions, sometimes they've been staggered, so the transportation plan will happen, a year before the comp plan, or a few years before the comp plan, or the sewer plan. But this is actually, I know it's all one big lump cost, but this is actually ideal because you have all the data at all the same time. Because what happens is when you start staggering like that, your sewer information that you're getting is 2 or 3 years behind when you go to start updating other elements of your comp plan. And so it's not matching up to, current population trends of what you're trying to project out for those 20 years. And so I know it seems like a lot of money. The cities spend this all the time, again, kind of staggered out. But, just the sewer elements or the sewer study, the sewer plan by itself, you're looking at a $300,000-$400,000 effort, several engineers working on this, looking at projected needs over the next 20 years on expanding and maintaining our system. And so that's just one element. Transportation, you're talking about, boots on the ground, people going out there doing traffic counts and doing traffic modeling for where is congestion going to be in the next 20 years and what plans do we need to start making today to take care of those. Same goes with water and same goes with stormwater. And so you're doing everything at one time, where again, some cities stagger them out, but then you're also dealing with delayed data that doesn't really quite match up with the other data that you have. That, and in addition to just general inflation across the board, we're feeling it from consultants. It's, just like with lumber prices, it's happening to consultants. So there's some of that built into. Does that answer your question?
Councilmember Scarborough, does that answer your question?
It helps. Thank you. I'd like to hear what Jason's got to say.
Councilman, and I will agree with Mr. Swanson. I remember it being north of $1 million as well. Ms. Hassert, there was a question posed to you.
Yes, we do have the money to pay for this. It's going to be staggered out both in this year and in 2013's budget.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Hassert. Councilmember Scarborough, do you have anything further?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Gamble, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's all I was gonna say was just from the standpoint of allocation in the budget. Because I know we budget for comprehensive plan, updates. And so it would be more pointed towards, hey, is this, are we allocated in this, but in the budget, what percentage of this is that? And it does make sense to me. We're kind of combining because it's project management services overseeing that. So the percent of the comprehensive plan that will be allocated to project management services spread amongst all of these different system plans. And where does that, is that 1.8, does it put us over? Does it keep us within what we already had allocated? My assumption is, just knowing Ms. Hassert, that this is in line with the budget, the expense allocations that we have already put in the plan or looking out for the comprehensive plan update.
Okay, anything further, Councilmember Gamble?
Nope.
Thank
Unless
you.
he wants to correct me and say, no, we haven't planned for it at all and it's over by 1.8 million. Then I have many questions.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion or a motion? All right, seeing no motion.
I'll move.
Councilmember Fulcher, go ahead.
I move to authorize the mayor to sign the consultant contract with MIG, authorizing the consultant to provide project management services to complete the 2024 comprehensive plan updates in an amount not to exceed $1.8 million and expressly authorize further minor revisions as deemed necessary or appropriate.
Hanford second.
We have a motion from Councilmember Fulcher, a second from Councilmember Hanford. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll move to vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes 6-0. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is Councilmember reports. Councilmember Fulcher.
Yeah, in thinking of the last week, I spent probably about 5 hours on hold with the Transportation Committee in Olympia. So that was my big city thing for the week. We did finally get a chance to thank them for including 522 on the moving forward Washington packet. So our voice was heard down there, and that is all I have to report.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Kinney.
I also attempted to testify to transportation, and they just had so much interest, wasn't able to do that, but I did submit written testimony. That's it.
Thank you. And Councilmember Kinney, Councilmember Fulcher, I thank you very much. I also spent 5.5 to 6 hours on hold before I had an opportunity to comment. I know that not one of the three of us was able to comment on the first go around with the Senate because that ended up going into a second day. I realized that each of you took time off from your work to do that the first time and did not get to give comment. Councilmember Fulcher, I know that you were on for a considerable amount of time for the time in front of the House, and that you were still able to come back and give testimony. I thank both of you for the amount of time you took to give 60 seconds of testimony for something that is extremely important to our community. So thank you both very much for taking the time to do that. Councilmember Scarborough, go ahead.
Yeah, I was downtown for the chocolate walk, and the only comments I got, other than they liked everything that was down there, the only things they didn't like was the 2 comments where there's no parking, there's no public bathrooms. So those are 2 things I know that have bathrooms have ramifications, and parking, nobody knows where to put it. We might ask the school district about the old district office, and being in conjunction with their thinking and letting us use that or putting up signs to use it for public parking on certain events. And I understand that there are bathroom trailers that could be moved in for specific events instead of building a public bathroom somewhere that turns into a housing for homeless. So those are the only comments I got other than good ones. Thoughts for future things for the board, or those two. That's all.
Thank you, Councilmember Scarborough. Councilmember Fisher, go ahead.
Councilmember Kinney and I attended the P3 meeting.
Nice. Thank you, Councilmember Fisher. Councilmember Hanford, go ahead.
Thank you. It's not on there, but we had our Legislative Affairs Committee meeting a couple weeks ago. And so we had that, and we're going to be continuing to talk about different rules of procedure, possible amendments for the future, things like that. And we looked at our 2022 work plan. Councilmember Fulcher was there, as well as Councilmember Fisher. So I think the only other thing I was going to say was I'm looking forward to meeting in person soon as a council. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hanford, on that, while we have not made an official announcement, I'm expecting that our first day, what we're at least planning for at this point, is March 22nd for our first hybrid meeting since July. So council members, we have not advertised that yet, but I know that's probably on each of your minds. The mask requirement to be in a public space is lifted on the 21st of March, which would put us at March 22nd to be able to hold a meeting in chambers without having to worry about the issue of masks. So that's the date that we're looking at this point. And I'm very certain that that's going to be the date, but we'll make a more official announcement in the next week. All right. Councilmember Gamble, go ahead.
Yes, so we did meet as a finance, even though we didn't have a meeting last week, we did meet from the finance committee. And we also went over our work plan for 2022, reviewed that, and then also had discussion around employee recruitment and retention policy. I thought this was great. Staff brought this forward, and I hope we continue this conversation as we're in a pretty competitive work environment. I know we all see that in the private sector, and it's also in the public sector, and really kind of maybe potentially doing more of a review, or what are some retention policies that we could put in place, and then also some recruitment strategies. So good conversation, and I'm sure there is more to come in that particular arena. And then let's see, two other things. So the first up would be March 26th, annual Monroe Public School Foundation auction. So you can put that on your calendars. I know a lot of council members in the past have participated. It is online again. So it'll open up, I believe, on the 25th. Be open through the online portion, but then there's an opportunity to bid on live auction items on the 26th. And that does benefit all the Sky Valley education and anybody that's in the Monroe School District, students and all the programs that are associated there. And then the final thing was just, I apologize for being late tonight. We have another one that's starting driver's ed, so be careful out there. I got so I had to attend for the parent side of that with my nephew, Mr. Zane McGrath, and he going through the E911 school. And we've got some great, whether it's the defensive driving school, the Safe to Go, some great businesses in town, and then just sitting through the E911 presentation tonight for parents and getting to see one of our own, because I know Officer Robinson, who's also our SRO up at the school district, is the owner and has teaches there. And it was just, what a synergy to see these kids that see an SRO officer that are now teaching them how to drive. And it was very apparent. And then when you're having conversations about drugs and alcohol and texting and being safe in our community, it was pretty impactful for me. He did a great job. And just thought I would share. Just great to see all of these businesses trying to get our kids started out on the right foot. And like we had to cut several kids. Some went to the Safe to Go. They did a fantastic job as well. But tonight I got to sit through the one for E911 with a lot of our first responders, also in the surrounding areas that are teachers, like a Redmond police officer that teaches there, and some EMTs. And it was just really neat that it's right here in our community, and the place was packed. So it was great.
All right. Thank you very much, Councilmember Gamble. And I did reach all the council members, and yes. All right. We're going to go ahead and go on to staff and department reports. We'll start off with the police department.
Comment.
Councilmember Scarborough, go ahead.
Remind Ms. Wonkoff will not be in attendance next week.
Thank you. Councilmember Scarborough, we understand you will not be in attendance next week. Thank you.
Correct.
All right. Any other updates from council members related to absences or? All right. Thank you. We're going to go ahead and move on to staff and department reports. First report is police department report with Chief Jolly. So we'll bring Chief Jolly in. Chief Jolly, good evening. How are you?
Great. Mr. Mayor, you have your report before you. I would just submit because of the time. If you have any questions, I would be available.
Council members, do you have any questions about the report that's before you? Chief Jolly, is there anything you wanted to highlight in the report?
Let me see. We could pull it up. I can't see it here. Jody, do you have that?
Yeah, give me a second. Oop. Can you see that?
I can. Yeah, if you could go ahead and scroll down, we've had a couple of cases you saw up there above that there was a case that was solved. Got a lot of good press for that. Our community outreach stats. Thank you for all those who participated, helped with the Jamie Bindle Memorial Run, another phenomenal event. And special thanks to Sean Van Eaton and a host of others who helped put that together. It's a phenomenal tribute and makes our community look very good. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions for Chief Jolly? All right, Chief, thank you for everything you're doing, and thank you. Next report then we have is the Human Services report with Mr. Christian. Mr. Christian, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Thank you very much for your time. I'll just touch on some brief highlights of the annual Human Service report. This report was prepared by our consultant, Ms. Rachel Adams. In this report, you'll see the detailed work that CHSAB has done over the last year to help human services. This includes legislation, housing, budgeting, and fund recommendations for council, public safety. One I'd like to touch on would be the needs assessment that was done, that was brought to council in the fall. And that really highlights a lot of the work and that is being done in the Sky Valley and where those gaps may be as we move forward. So this is really a data-driven report that was done by Kulik Strategic Advisors. It had over 350 touches, including individual contact, as well as service providers and several community forums that were held in both English and in Spanish. And so that's really a data-driven report for them as we move forward and find those gaps and give recommendations to council. The next part I'd like to highlight is just the CHSAB members were really excited about the first round of funding and being able to support one of the mayor's pillars of supporting recovery. And thank you to all of those members that volunteered. There was over 30 applications. There was 10 awards recommended to council, and thank you, council, for approving those. They're very excited to move forward with the next rounds as well. As we continue through that report, there you will see many collaborations and many projects that the CHSAW board has looked through and worked on with service providers as well as subject matter experts. Those include safe parking, community land trusts, and several others. A brief update as to kind of where we've gone through this year and even up to tonight. Thank you very much for filling our board and approving the mayor's recommendations. We now have 11 voting members and 2 ad hoc members. And so far this year, they've worked with the Monroe Equity Council, as well as done some legislative updates with one of the members of the board, as well as with Chief Jolly on police legislation coming up. And so they'll continue to work to provide recommendations for you in the future. A final note that I would like to highlight in the packet is our cold weather shelter. So that runs from November through March. There's 2 available options, one in Monroe and one in Snohomish. And so far this year, they've been open 38 days. They've served 74 members for 410 bed nights. And so that's an amazing feat alone. But a lot of the members that make that happen are based upon a volunteer capacity, and they are either on your CHSAW board or work very closely with it. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I would take any questions that the council may have.
Thank you, Mr. Christian. I appreciate all the work you're doing and CHSAB and just everything in general. Thank you. Council members, do you have any questions or follow-up? I'd encourage you to review the report that is in there that Mr. Christian brought up. It had a lot of work that went into it. And if you have any questions about it, please feel free to reach out to me or and also to Mr. Christian. So any questions for Mr. Christian? All right, thank you. The next one then is Human Resources IT Department, also with Mr. Christian. So apparently this is your section of the report.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. For HR, we continue to accept applications, review them, schedule interviews, and then extend offers. So since I last spoke to you, we were able to hire a new public works supervisor, and we've also extended offers to a planning manager as well as a parks administrative assistant. And then we have 3 other jobs that we are currently in the process of interviewing. We've been through the first round and we're scheduling for the second round. So hopefully when I come back to you, we'll have a few more positions filled and be onboarding some new employees. The next section I would like to go briefly is our current employees. We always like to highlight our anniversaries. And so you can see those in the packet. We have several members that have been with us for a long time or are reaching milestones. So I'll run through those real quick. Mr. Paul Ryan of our police department for 17 years, Mr. Justin Springer of our police department for 16 years, excuse me. Mr. Gary Watkins of our public works department, and I apologize, there was a typo. He's been with us for 16 years. Mr. Max Michelle of our police department for 15 years, Mr. Jordan Otto of our public works department for 15 years, Mr. Ken Stickles of our IT department for 9 years, and someone that needs no introduction, Miss Becky Hassert, who is on the screen with us for 5 years. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I will conclude my HR portion of that report and take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Christian. Any questions for Mr. Christian on those items? All right, thank you very much. Next report we have is from Stacy Criswell. Mr. Criswell, go ahead. Good evening.
Mayor,
Yes.
we still have Tyler's other IT
Oh, I'm sorry,
report.
IT. Let's go with IT.
That's okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, Stacy.
So we will run through this really quickly. The city IT department, along with some other staff members from other departments, have upgraded our GIS system. And if you're interested, there's a link in the packet where you can look at that. We continue to work towards upgrading our Springbrook financial system to the cloud. We're really trying to make sure that the pre-live version is going to work when we go live. And so we continue to work through the checklist on that, and we'll continue to bring updates when that's going to come. The IT department is supporting our police department on the back end for our body worn cameras. And I'm sure that Chief Jolly will continue to give operational updates, and we will continue to support as we can on the back end. Cybersecurity, we did, and disaster recovery, we did have a little bit of a change. We found a solution that is far less hands-on, and so it's operationally more efficient. It's also monetarily more efficient. And so that is something that the IT department is pretty excited about. And then in preparation for hopefully when we can all be in council again, we are preparing the council chambers to make sure that all of our technology works in there for hybrid meetings, as well as all council members. Your devices were on a replacement schedule, and so you will have new devices when you join back. So on that happy note, Mr. Mayor, I will end my report, and if there's any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Okay. So really, we're ending your report this time, and
Really ending it this time.
I'm
Yes, sir.
sorry about that. I forgot you had 2 reports in one. All right, so any questions on the IT component that Mr. Christian has just brought up? All right, thank you, Mr. Christian.
Thank you
All
very much.
right,
Have a great evening.
Stacy, Mr. Criswell, you are up now.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. So thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. So you've already got the report in front of you, but there are just 2 things that I wanted to highlight. And actually, a lot of this really goes back to the HR department and kind of, moving mountains. So we've been able to hire 2 new positions. One is our new building inspector, Vicky Forte. She comes from the city of Sultan. And if we were live, I'd point to her and say, everybody say hi, but we're not just yet. The second one is Hannah Maynard. She's our new planning tech, and she comes to us from the city of Marysville. We're also very excited, as Mr. Christian just mentioned, we've kind of got a conditional offer out right now for a planning manager, and that would actually, for the first time in a long time, kind of get our department fully staffed. So we're very excited for that. So with that, if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Criswell. Any questions for Mr. Criswell? All right, thank you very much. We'll go ahead and move into Finance Department. That'd be Ms. Hassert. Ms. Hassert, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the finance report is in your packet, and pretty much as those of you who have been with me and suffered through me for 5 years know, January tends to be a light report as it's way too early to do any kind of trending or any real analysis. And the finance department is still currently focused on working on the annual report. However, the one item that I would like to highlight is the investment report. We have had a couple of investments that matured early during December due to the interest rate markets going on out there. And in conjunction with that, we have reinvested all those funds. And what is nice about our current strategy of laddering our due dates is that we are starting to see our interest rates start to creep back up again. So we are starting to invest at about the right time, and we're starting to see the average return on the portfolio start picking up for our long-term investments. With that, Mr. Mayor, I am available if anybody's got any questions, and I will turn it back to you.
Thank you, Ms. Hassert. Any questions for Ms. Hassert? All right, thank you. Economic Development Report. Mr. Hebner, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening to you, sir. Good evening, council members. Your February 2022 Economic Development Report is in your packet. Just a quick couple of quick highlights for you all tonight. Councilmember Fulcher did one additional thing for the city, at least one additional thing last week. That was to chair a meeting of the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee, which was held on February 16th. When the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee met last October, they discussed the possibility of doing 2 rounds of grant applications for 2022, basically a first half of the year and a second half, to really allow the city to evaluate opportunities for tourism development and event opportunities in the latter half of the year. So at their meeting last week, the LTAC voted to go ahead and open that planned second round. I'm planning to open that application cycle tomorrow morning and have applications due by Friday, April 8th. So more information to come in future reports on a second round of lodging tax grant applications. We recently signed a contract with HVS Convention, excuse me, let me move my window really quick, Convention Sports and Entertainment Facilities Consulting to perform the lodging needs assessment that you all approved last year as an EDAB recommended priority project. That work is just about to get underway. HVS is anticipating completing that work in approximately 8 weeks, and they are planning to be in the area in the early part of March for their in-market analysis. The Monroe Chamber of Commerce has announced the return of the Monroe Farmers Market in 2022, opening on Wednesday, May 25th and running through September 7th. That event, the Farmers Market, was a really big draw for our community last year, as there was so much instability and uncertainty with other event opportunities. So the city is really excited that the chamber is continuing that program next year. In our ARP funds, the city has opened the second round of applications. A second round of 1.3 million approximately is available. Applications were opened on Wednesday the 16th and are due by 4:30 p.m. on Friday, April 15th. Projects will continue to be categorized into 3 priority categories: supporting recovery, reconnecting community, and building resiliency. In addition to aligning with one of those city categories, the proposed projects will need to also align with a federal expenditure category. And there is a list of those in your packet. Feel free to take a look at those. And if you have any questions on those, myself or Mr. Pyland and Ms. Hassert from Finance are available to answer any questions. And finally, I just wanted to mention the gateway signage installation process is underway. A hat tip to Mr. Roberts and Mr. Peterson in Public Works, who picked up this project. The design concept was put together through consultation with the EDAB and members of our community. That process was completed by us in the executive department. Once the design was done and we were ready to move to fabrication and installation, the Public Works team picked up that project and guided it through the bid process. I included some images in your packet of a rendering and a status update on one of those signs. They will be installed at the Main Street and State Route 522 roundabout and at the Lewis Street Bridge, planned by the end of March, weather permitting. And your packet includes some information on the additional phases to follow. Mr. Mayor, that concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions from council.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hebner. Any questions for Mr. Hebner? All right, I see none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, and I understand that we do not have a report from Mr. Roberts today for the emergency management report. Does anybody have any questions for emergency management? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on to merit administrative reports. Item 12.1, extended agenda. Ms. Wyckoff, go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Jody Wyckoff, City Clerk. For the record, I'm going to look over here because I'm reading straight off my screen. For the March 1st meetings, we have a Public Safety Committee meeting where they will be discussing, have a community court update and a legislative update regarding the Blake decision. At the regular study session, we will have a presentation from Community Transit, an update on their 2024 network planning. And we will also have a discussion regarding the municipal campus project. For the March 8th meeting, we have Legislative Affairs Committee meeting. As Councilmember Hanford mentioned, we will have a continued discussion regarding council rules of procedure, some board and commission amendments to the code, and a legislative update as well. Under the regular business meeting, we have consent agenda with APACH, payroll minutes, as well as accepting a project and begin lien period for the 2021 annual road maintenance project, and an ordinance amending chapter 4.5 for the park board. Under public hearing, we have the right-of-way vacation for 171st Avenue Southeast. And you can see on your screen the various reports from the departments. And I am available for questions. And I know Councilmember Scarborough already mentioned his absence. And this is traditionally where council also mentions any potential absences for these two meetings.
Thank you, Ms. Wyckoff. Any other absences to mention in addition to Councilmember Scarborough's from earlier? All right, looks like we have none. Anything further, Ms. Wyckoff? Any questions for Ms. Wyckoff? All right, thank you, everybody. Okay, next item then is Mayor's Report. I will just draw your attention to Monroe This Week, Volume 8, Edition 7. I also will report that I had a nice staff get together Thursday, I think, last week. We went through and recognized everybody with their years of service. It was great seeing everybody in real life again, in one room with probably about 60 to 80 people in the room. And anyway, it was just nice seeing folks again. So staff has already gone over all of the people that had reached certain milestones. So just, we've got a great group of folks, and I know the council knows that. And I just take the moment to express how much I appreciate the work that they do. I shared with them Monroe this week. I'm sorry, not Monroe this week, Imagine Monroe. We went over that with the group. I think people appreciated the work the council did in reviewing that and approving that. We talked a little bit about some of the goals that I have for the next 4 years that are at least my goals that will be up to the council, of course, to implement, including doing the work to City Hall, which I feel is something that really needs to occur. I think most of you on the council realize the importance of doing that work to City Hall. And I'm looking forward to having those conversations over the next several weeks. On that, if you are interested in taking a tour of City Hall, please reach out to me. I will be happy to work with Jody and staff to make certain we can make arrangements for you, maybe in pairs or groups of 3, to walk through City Hall and see what some of the issues are, just to remind yourself of some of the problems we have with our current configuration and utilities and things like that. So if you're interested in doing that, please reach out to me and to Jody. The other thing too, I went ahead and attended LTAC also to present Imagine Monroe, did that last week. And I also, as I noted earlier, gave testimony after about 5.5 to 6 hours worth of waiting to the House committee, as I was not able to sign up for a second day to wait for the Senate committee to talk about 522. So right now it's only $10 million. I know that we need about 155 or so million, but it's important for us to maintain that visibility to get that project done. And like I said before, I really appreciated both Councilmember Fulcher and Kenny for doing their work to be there and to submit a letter and so on. So with that said, I do have a legislative letter proposal online. I'd ask you to take a look at that. I'd like to know if any council members object to having their names added to this. It's simply expressing our appreciation for including this in the package currently, and just expressing that we support moving forward with funding. And I think it also acknowledges that we do need more funding, and thank you for this funding. So Councilmember Hanford, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to thank you for putting that together, and glad to see that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Gamble, go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate this as well, and I would absolutely add my signature to it. And I didn't say it earlier, but thanks again for Councilmember Kinney and Fulcher for speaking on our behalf on this as well. And I definitely drew the good straw, because I didn't wait 5 hours last time this thing came up like a year ago. So I really appreciate you guys doing that. So thanks.
Yeah, I got to say, that's one nice thing about at least having hybrid meetings, and I'm hoping that Olympia will continue doing this. This isn't, I get uncomfortable sitting here. I hope that doesn't show too much, but I've been here since 6 this morning. But one of the nice things is that I don't have to take a full day off from work to drive down to give 60 seconds of testimony or find out you're going to run out of time and don't get to say anything. So it allows you to multitask and do other things while listening, and then finally get to speak. So I think that's one thing I'm hoping they continue. Councilmember Fulcher, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with this letter. I think that's a really good way to put it. On the note that you just said, I just had some visual memories pop up in my my Facebook feed the other day of Councilmember Scarborough and Mayor Thomas and I with the original Finish 522 campaign, our pictures down on the Olympia steps. So it's a battle we've been fighting for a while. Yeah. So definitely put my name on this, and I am happy to see this letter get put out for us. Thanks.
Thank you. For people who haven't spoken yet, is there any objection to having your name on the letter?
No
All right.
objection, sir.
So Jody will go ahead and add your names to the letter, and we'll also, Jody, could you also follow up with Councilmember Davis and see if he'd be willing to sign as well?
Yes.
Cool. Thank you very much. Oh, and I will add also that take the next step, contacting me last week and asked me to support funding that goes to family resource centers. And I sent in a letter under my a very short email under my own name expressing support for that to Representative Eslick and State Senator Wagner. So I did not include the city council on that because we hadn't discussed it, but I suspect you would have been supportive. I just had my name in there. So, and I let them know that I did that after they requested it. All right, so that's all that I have for now. And does anybody have any questions for me? All right, thank you. So we do have a need for an executive session this evening, and the executive session will include a couple of different topics, but they will fall under pricing of property pursuant to RCW 42.30.110 subsection 1 subsection little c, and potential litigation pursuant to RCW 42.30.110 subsection 1 subsection little I for an initial 10 minutes with the likelihood of extensions. And I will announce those extensions here to Ms. Wyckoff, who will then present them here in this general legislative session. I'm sorry, in this regular council meeting session. And we will return to this session after the executive session to take action, if nothing else, to adjourn for the evening. So we are now in executive session for 10 minutes, beginning at 9:30 p.m.
Councilmember Hamford, you need to follow the link to the other meeting. For the record, this is Jody Wyckoff, City Clerk. The executive session has been extended 5 minutes. For the record, this is Jody Wyckoff, City Clerk. The executive session has been extended an additional 5 minutes.
Hey, Jody.
Yes, sir.
Just hi.
Oh, hi.
Yeah, you can, if you're, I don't know if Becky's bringing folks in or you.
Oh, yes, I should probably wake up and do that.
No worries.
I got them.
Thank you.
I just need 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We've got one more than we need. 6. Okay.
All that's out there.
Okay. All right. Then time is 9:51. We are out of executive session. Unless there's objection, we are adjourned. Is there any objection? All right. We are adjourned. Have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Night, everyone.
Good night.
All right.